Dear partners, dear colleagues, dear friends, as the saying goes, save the best for last. And so it gives me an enormous pleasure today to welcome you to the last session of our virtual meeting series as of now, as we will be back later this year. What an inspiring journey this has been so far. We are and still are overwhelmed by the extremely positive feedback from you, your engagement, your inspiration, joining us from all parts of the world. This is truly amazing, and we are so grateful that you all share our vision that only together, only through exchange, can we move forward. Proudly, we are partnering with Sana Technical Assistance Facilities in this important virtual event. So a massive thank you to our long-standing partners and friends at Finance in Motion and Sanataf, and here in particular to Elvira Lefting, Elena Matjolius, Maha Okeil, and Ole Nestingen. And I'm very happy to be able to say for another excellent cooperation. A huge thank you also to the German Emirati Joint Council for Industry and Commerce, and here in particular to Oliver Oems for their kind support. And a huge thank you also to you, Rebecca Schmidt, for having designed our website. So as you can see, one hand does not clap. Together as partners, we are so happy to see that our GAWBL platform, which we founded to connect, to empower, and to engage with women across Germany, the Arab region, and the international community, is constantly growing. And this is thanks to you. Thanks to your support, your commitment, and your inspiration. When we started our journey, we didn't know where it would take us. Now we know. It has led us to you. Yes, we're becoming more and more, and this is even more important in times of crisis. And indeed, these are still unprecedented times, full of challenges, fears, and losses, but also full of strength, hope, and opportunities. Times when resilience, innovation, and solidarity are key when addressing and adapting these new scenarios. And it is together that we must address these challenges. It is together that we must turn them into opportunities for the better. So our commitment at GAWBL is to moving forward, taking this crisis as an opportunity for the better. Clearly, we all need to rethink, reframe, and redo how we innovate for the future. And I think we can all agree that this pandemic has been proven so far that crisis can also be opportunities, perhaps sometimes forced opportunities, but opportunities to dare something new, to adapt to new scenarios, but clearly opportunities that should be open to all of us. So today we take a stock. We want to look at the lessons learned during this pandemic from different perspectives and identify key imperatives for the way forward. And this is why I am particularly happy to welcome our wonderful moderator and speakers today, coming from all different walks of life, sharing their very different expertise, coming from different backgrounds, different working experience, but all having this bold experience on hands-on. And now in alphabetical order, Nadine Shihad joining us today from Beirut, Dr. Ilham Khatib joining us today from Ramallah, Sahana Arun Kumar joining us from Paris, Katrin Lemke joining us from Doha, Professor Sabine Wölflik joining us from Munich, whom our wonderful moderator Katrin will later introduce in detail. Did I forget someone? Of course not. Because now it truly is my honor and pleasure to welcome our distinguished keynote speaker, Her Excellency Brigitte Zypries. former Federal Minister for Economic Affairs and Energy. And maybe you can hear my verbal drum roll now, for I am truly excited to have you here with us today. Brigitte, you have an incredibly impressive CV with so many firsts. So please allow me to highlight the following. As I have said already, you have been the first woman in Germany to hold the post of Minister for Economic Affairs and Energy. And this is something worth mentioning. Your professional career in German politics began after your second state law examination in the legal department of the Wiesbaden State Chancellery. And from then on, it only went in one direction, upwards. From 2002 to 2009, you were Federal Minister of Justice. For 12 years, you have been directly elected member of the German Bundestag. And from 2013 to 17, you served as Parliamentary State Secretary responsible for information technology and foreign trade. You held the post as Federal Government Coordinator for Aerospace for 4 years. And since April 2018, you have taken on various tasks and honorary posts, promoting and investing in German startups. You are an ombudswoman for various organizations and sit on the supervisory boards of Better Place and Bombardier. To be honest, for me, you are a true role model, a pioneer for women's empowerment and success, and a mentor. Yes, a mentor. And please allow me to share one anecdote that we share, because I have experienced this at first hand. It was back in 2017 at an Arab-German business conference in Berlin. You were Federal Minister for Economy back then, delivering your keynote speech as honored guest. The big conference room was filled with gentlemen in black suits, estimated average age 50 plus, and perhaps 6, 7, maybe 8 women scattered in between. At that time, I was planning the first German Arab Women Business Leaders Summit, and you had obviously been informed about that, because you included that in your official speech. I was listening, I was sitting in the middle of the conference room, directly at the center aisle, I will never forget. When you finished your speech and walked out of the conference room, you leaned down to me, patted me on my shoulder, and wished me success. And I will never forget your kind and encouraging words. Great initiative. We need more like this. I will support you. And you did. Let me repeat. And you did. A small gesture back then, a huge impact ever since. And I remember with gratitude and pride, I must say, when you accepted our invitation to hold the laudatory speech of the Ta'awun, which means Cooperation Award, back at our Summit 2018, which honors cooperation between German and Arab businesswomen. So clearly, this is what happens when women truly support women. And when I asked you for today, your reply came straight away, accepted with pleasure. And here you are. And so I'm now particularly looking forward to your keynote speech, Brigitte Zypris. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Gabi, for these nice words. And you see me blushing, do you? Very kind of you. You asked me to speak about the impacts of the corona pandemic for the sectors of our society and what we might be able to learn about it. And since the pandemic shows us in all areas of our lives where something works and where there are deficits, I thought I have a quick glimpse on different sectors, say a few words for everything, and then we'll see. First, of course, the state. Action in Germany is under particular criticism at this moment. Crisis management is not working as the majority of the population expect it to do. In particular, decision-making between the federal state and the Länder in Germany seems to be disturbed. The organization of the vaccines is criticized. Actually, I agree. And there are not enough tests in stock to be able to test nationwide as it is necessary. The pandemic has also shown that Germany has a lot of catching up to do in the digitization of schools. This is in the responsibility of the Länder, but all of them have problems. Studies show every second school has a great difficulty getting through the corona crisis. Pupils have learned less. Corona so further worsens the educational opportunities of the disadvantaged. The money now made available for tutoring is just a drop in the ocean. If we look at the economy, we have to face the worst recession in post-war history in Germany. The gross domestic product will shrink significantly, and the federal state is facing billions of debts for the next years. According to the Federal Employment Agency, the labor market is being supported by the massive use of short-time work. In September last year, companies paid 2.2 million people short-time allowance. The number of people who receive unemployment benefits has risen significantly. Unemployment in November 2020 was 2.7 million people, nearly 24% higher than in the previous year. In my opinion, it is at least as important that the pandemic recently exposes the backwardness of German industry and especially German SMEs when it comes to digitization. Germany has been the country that supplies the world with cars and enables industrial production in other countries with machines and plants for the last decades. This business model is facing a particular challenge through digitization. It is not only a matter of connecting hardware and software for the production process, so-called Industry 4.0. German entrepreneurs have to develop new and different business models for customers, and this is not easy for them because they're just not used to it. In this certain aspect of digitization, of course, otherwise, of course, used to it. Looking at the working world, we can see that Corona is accelerating the digitization of the world of work. The proportion of all employees who work from home has risen from 12 up to 25% as a result of Corona. This increases the pressure on companies to create a digital infrastructure for working from home. But of course, it also leads to a division in the world of work. People doing care work can't do it from their desk. And in the European Union, 95% of the people working in a household are women. 93% of the kindergarten teachers are women. 86% of the healthcare workers are women. And 82% of the cashiers in the supermarkets. According to a study, home office is predominantly seen as positive. This is certain true, especially for young people without children, or for older ones like me. On Tenerife, where I worked remotely for the last 3 months, I met many young people from Germany who had rented nice villas there in groups and were taking full advantage of the opportunity to work from their computer and enjoy the ocean in the afternoon. Families with school-aged children will not enjoy the home office as much. In small flats with 4 or even more people at the computer, the balancing between doing one's own work and supporting the children's homework while still cooking and doing other housework. Looking at the society, we can see that the pandemic makes social differences more visible and deepened the problems of certain population groups. Women do even more unpaid work than before the crisis. Also, the contribution of fathers to do care work has increased. Whether there will be more equality or whether traditional gender roles will be entrenched remains to be seen. Just today, the World Economic Forum announced that the Corona year 2020 set women's equality back decades. The pandemic had particularly affected women because household and care for children and the elderly have been disproportionately left to women. In addition, domestic violence has been on the rise since the first phase of corona-related restrictions on public life. The effects of the viral crisis on the psyche are also enormous. The massive restriction in everyday life promotes the development of depression, anxiety, and obsessive compulsive disorders, as well as psychosomatic complaints in many people. Children and young people in particular also suffer from the crisis. Some studies come to the conclusion that they are significantly worse off since the pandemic. Well, not a very optimistic view on the state of our country. But if we look on the other side of the coin, we can see positive aspects for women. Women are more flexible and adaptable, and therefore traditionally better able to cope with change. They will therefore benefit much better from the expanded possibilities of digital education. Another aspect, today we have a broad debate on the importance of equality for the economy and society. More and more women are participating in this debate and demanding their rights. Slowly but surely we can see a change, and I really appreciate that especially the younger women get more organized through the different social systems, digital systems, and try to raise their voice. Another aspect, if our industry is to make the transition to the digitized economy, we need more women in leadership positions for business to succeed, because everyone knows that only diverse teams and companies succeed in with a digitized business model. And another aspect, the men who have taken on more care work at home as a result of the pandemic can share their positive experiences and use them to encourage others to embark on the adventure of having a child. This is something we always have to keep in mind. We won't get the change without men. We need men, and the first step to get women in higher positions, because that's where they are now. And this is where they have to help us to get there as well. And I'm sure during the discussion we will find a lot of other aspects of this topic, and I'm curious to hear what you are going to say.
Thank you so much, Brigitte, for this first-hand, utmost open, honest, and powerful keynote, addressing the many challenges, but also to see how we can turn these into opportunities, what could be changing for the better, for more gender equality and so forth. And so I'm very happy that you will also be joining our panel discussion right now. Thank you so much, and there will be much more coming from you later on. Thank you so much, Brigitte. So now it is my pleasure to introduce Katrin Lemke, our moderator today, to you. Katrin, you have been the official representative of AHK in Doha since September 2016. And AHK represents the Association of German Chambers of Industry and Commerce and is part of the main pillars of foreign investment promotion in Germany. You started your career as regional expert for the Gulf countries at the Rorfa Arab-German Chamber of Commerce and Industry in 2010. And this is where we met. I still recall that very well. In 2012, you relocated to the United Arab Emirates and joined the Ras Al Khaimah Free Trade Zone Authority, having held several senior roles in the key client relations and the business development department. In your last position as investment relation consultant, you coordinated the authority's investment promotion strategies for Europe, for the Middle East, and North America. You graduated from Leipzig University with a master's degree in Middle Eastern Studies and Political Science. And that, my dearest Katrin, is definitely not the only thing we have in common. I studied the same, as we share our passion for women empowerment ever since we met in 2010. So I couldn't think of a better moderator than you, guiding us today through our conversation and looking into this virtual round of concentrated women power and expertise. I'm all the more looking forward to an insightful, inspiring, and engaging session. So, Katrin, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Gabi, for the nice introduction, and welcome to everyone also from sunny Doha, Qatar, to today's session that I'm also looking forward to, and I'm very delighted to moderate a panel of, you've said it already, of different women from different walks of lives, professional backgrounds, and also based in different parts of the world, which will make it very interesting. And based on our panelists' profiles, we will touch different angles during our discussion, such as innovation, digitization, finance, and science. And to keep it as interactive as possible for the audience, we will throw a few poll questions during our discussion. So everyone be ready to participate, because we would also like to hear your experience regarding the topics that we will discuss. And I believe that we will also keeping some time at the end of the discussion to take some questions from the attendees. So if you have a question throughout the panel discussion, feel free to drop your questions in the chat, which Gabi will monitor, and then we will address some of the questions later on as well. And please allow me to introduce the panelists today. I'll try to keep it short, but I think it's worth mentioning because all of them have a very interesting bios and have worked in different sectors, which brings a lot of expertise and knowledge to the table. So I'll start with Professor Dr. Sabine Wölflich, which is representing design thinking today, joining us from Munich. Sabine is a professor of marketing in print and media technology at the Munich University of Applied Science, which I believe, Sabine, is the building that we can see behind you. You've been working in product development for almost 20 years now, and 5 years ago you came across a new innovation method called design thinking that you will explain to us a little bit further and in depth. Sabine is also a certified Scrum Master of the Scrum Alliance, which is, I believe, a software development tool that helps manage complex work in teams. And this is basically also the idea that you will present to us later on. Then I'm also very pleased to have Sahana Arun Kumar with us, who is managing partner at Avrio Impact. With over 13 years of experience in the digital and financial inclusion space, Sahana focuses on enabling innovative business models for sustainable development in emerging markets. She specializes in design, strategy, and development of digital finance and inclusion projects, and worked with a wide range of stakeholders in this industry, from telecom operators to banks, microfinance institutions, as well as international donor organizations. Sahana's work covered a number of countries, not only in the Middle East, but also in Africa, Latin America, and Asia. She's also a speaker and trainer for digital and financial inclusion topics, and holds an MBA degree from HEC Paris, where she's based, and sits on the advisory board at Global Impact FinTech Forum. Welcome to our panel. Our next panelist is Nadine Shahade, Senior Financial Sector Specialist representing a think tank called CGAP, Consultative Group to Assist the Poor. This think tank works to empower poor people to capture opportunities and build resilience. Nadine works with various partners, including regulators and policymakers, also donors and investors, as well as regional associations and different businesses. She currently leads CGAP's global work on financial services in fragile countries and during humanitarian crises, and focuses on digital financial services and microfinance. Her work includes regulatory frameworks for financial sector development, cash transfers, innovation through fintech solutions, as well as financial inclusion measurement. She joined CGAP in 2012 and brings around 10 years of experience in investment banking, as well as management consulting and microfinance rating. And I'll go over to Jerusalem/Ramallah to Dr. Elham Khatib, who is an associate professor of dental public health and dean of the scientific research at Al-Quds University in Jerusalem, Palestine. Dr. Elham is also a research affiliate at the Public Policy Center, University of Iowa, where she graduated with PhD from, and an elected member of the International Dental Federation Public Health Committee. Dr. Elham is a diplomat of the American Board of Dental Public Health and a 2014 laureate of the L'Oreal UNESCO for Women in Science Lewand Award. She is also the co-chair of Women in Science organization, the Palestine chapter, and a board member of international organizations such as VISTER, International Rights for Rights and Development, Academic Network for Development Dialogue, and the Global Movement for Sustainable Health Equity. She is committed to improve oral health and general health for the disadvantaged, and she recently focuses on providing access to essential dental services for refugees. She is an educator, a health service researcher, a public health specialist, and also a proud mother of 2 sons. And she joins us today from Ramallah. And I'm especially delighted that our keynote speaker, Her Excellency Brigitte Cypris, will also join the panel discussion. And she has already been introduced by Gabi. So let's dive in. We can say that for over 1 year, we're over 1 year into the crisis now, and some of the aspects have been touched already in the keynote speech, and we have seen a lot of negative effects, especially the economy of countries and thus the livelihoods of many people, and here especially on women all over the world. So I think it's fair to say that the more developed countries are in a better position to support its people and the economies navigating through the pandemic and ease some of the effects and the impacts than the less developed countries. On the other hand, we can also see some positive developments, especially when it comes to technology. Technology that helps to be more flexible from home, also in homeschooling and education, but also in just simply staying connected. So I would like to address my first question to Professor Sabine. Can you give us an example of how innovation has changed the way we work and live? Yeah, due to innovation, we have smart devices that let us work anywhere, a cloud that keeps information with us wherever we go. And the new work trend helps to install mobile work policies that allow more and more people to choose where they want to work.
Perfect. Do you feel that, just a second question already, that innovation promoted a gender shift? And if yes, how?
Well, gender shift under Corona times, I think, well, we have, gender is not a topic that is going upwards in Corona times, but for innovation, we need multidisciplinary teams, and we need teams that bring different professionals, different skills and expertise together. And we also need men and women. We need both in those teams. And therefore, I think, yes, innovation helps for the gender shift.
Gabi, are we showing the presentation now from Dr. Sabine? Okay, perfect. So yeah, one of the innovation topics is actually what you work with. So maybe you can explain what the method of innovation thinking or design thinking means, and how can it help maybe also to shape the future.
Thank you, Katrin. I know design thinking for 5 years now, and I really like it, and I teach it to students, and I also do design thinking workshops in different companies. And well, design thinking creates practical results. And Gabi, if you please go to the next slide. And for design thinking, 3 topics or 3 components are really essential. It's the technical visibility, the economic viability, and human desirability. And the human perspective is really the most important for design thinking. In design thinking, we talk to the people who need new products, who need new services, or who need new experiences. And we talk to them again and again. We try to find out what they really need, what are really their problems, and how we could solve those. Gabi, please go to the next slide. And it's not very difficult. You only need 3 things. You need team, room, and process. I have already been talking about those teams in the first question. You see those 3 heads, and they are all different. So it's a good opportunity for women to be strong in innovation processes. And besides those multidisciplinary teams where you really have different backgrounds, functions, where people who join the process have to be curious and open-minded, you need, on a second hand, you need variable space, you need flexible workspaces, and we have a workflow. It's called here the design thinking process that we follow during the design thinking process. And it's really fun. It's a lot of fun doing design thinking. So please go to the next slide. Here you see a team. It's in our design thinking lab at the Hochschule München at the University of Applied Sciences in Munich. And we were a team of 4 design thinking members and a coach. I served as a coach. And here we had a topic. It's called a challenge, and we tried to solve the challenge. Next, please. Here you see the prototyping material for design thinking. To talk to the clients, to talk to the customers, you need prototyping materials. You need Lego, you need pictures, you need fabrics, you need images. You can see everything that you do not need at home anymore. You could bring and put in your design thinking lab, and it helps to come up with prototypes. And those prototypes show the function of your solution, the solution you have been innovating.
Here we have the design thinking process. You see 6 phases, starting with understanding, observing, coming up with a point of view. And after that, jumping in the second part of design thinking, coming up with new ideas, prototyping and testing. And as a design thinking coach, you will guide the team through the whole process, always going forward, going backward, and hopefully after that coming up with a super idea. That will be shown in the next pictures. Yes, if you go to the next, thanks. This is the first step of design thinking. So we really try to find out what the customer wants. We define the persona at first, and after that, we try to find out what our customer says, thinks, feels, and does. And after that, coming up with new ideas. Next, please. Here you can see a member of the design thinking team, and he's thinking, he's brainstorming, he's thinking of new ideas. And also you have a good look at our design thinking lab. You see that we have really flexible working environment, that we have boards, that we have cubes, that we have where you could sit, where you could present. A lot of fun, and it helps to be creative. And here you see a lot of prototypes, and maybe some of you may say, well, this is all rubbish, we can throw this away. But that is not true. Here you can see every cube has one prototype. So here you can see a lot of prototypes, and those prototypes show the function of different new solutions. Next. And after we have gone through the design thinking process, it takes 4 to 5 hours to go through the whole process. Then you are happy and you start over with Scrum method to go in project management. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the insights. And we want to ask the audience now, what has changed positively in your working life as a result of Corona? If anything, we hope that there has been some positive effects. So we'll have our first poll now that Gabi will bring up so you can see, and this is a multiple choice option, so you can click more than one answer. Is it a shift to more flexible working procedures, more home office, more agile leadership, digitization? Are you more prone now to be creative and innovative, or maybe none of the above?
So Katrin, work in progress. Still waiting for the results. As I can see it progressing here is very interesting. We will share that in a minute.
Maybe meanwhile, Sabine can also say if she has more requests now for this type of group work and companies than before Corona. Maybe does this have, and did this have any effect on your work?
Yeah, I really had to think about that when you asked me. On one hand, companies are very interested in innovation workshops, and we really started over with digital workshops. And on the other hand, I have workshops that have been postponed for 1 year now. So we have companies that say, no, if we do innovation, we want to be in a design thinking lab, and we really want to stay together and work together. And well, I have other companies that say, we need innovation right now. We have to change. The pandemic has shown us that we really have to change things.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So meanwhile, the results are here, and I'm going to share it with you now. So, interesting. Do you think that's surprising?
Shift to more flexible working procedures. I think for a lot of people, this is actually positive, can be positive, but like Brigitte said in her keynote speech, it also depends on how's your situation at home, if you have kids that you need to take care of at the same time, or support also with the homeschooling. So it can be positive. It can also have a negative effect. But I feel also personally that companies, maybe you share the same experience, are a little bit more lenient when it comes to flexible working hours than before. And talking about flexibility and also leading big teams now in the digital times, I would like to ask Sahana, given your role as a managing partner, and you lead also team on digital projects across the world or in various countries, what is your experience since the start of the pandemic?
Thank you, Catherine. Are you able to hear me well?
Yes.
Good. Thank you for the question, and I'll probably start, and it'll take us all back to more than a year now, when we all first had the shock of the pandemic, and it's really telling for my sector, because ever since I started in the consulting world, this was back in 2011, I've always worked remotely. So for me, working remotely is not new. What changed actually is the fact that you don't travel anymore to go and meet your client, or to go and actually look up a problem up close with team members, and try to work things out in personal dialogue, which is very important in certain cultures as well. You really need to be with people. And so all of a sudden, travel stopped. But we could continue working remotely, but we were like, okay, well, what do we do with this? And I remember putting together, at that time, we'll say it's one of the first webinars in March 2020, where we thought, okay, let's get some industry players, and we focused on the microfinance sector. And we got some of the, multinational, pan-continental MFIs, microfinance institutions, to come and tell us how they're coping and give some guidance and throw in some, ideas. And I remember one idea was very cool, to encourage teams to have virtual water cooler moments. So that would be like a virtual coffee break. Instead of going to the pantry and crossing somebody in a corridor, you actually get together on Zoom, and then you have Meet and Zoom and GoToWebinar. A lot of these things started getting very popular, right? So we started seeing us being pushed into more remote work, if that was possible, like from an already remote model. We started seeing pivoting, and to bit, Sabine's idea of design thinking, we started thinking of how to be more agile, because we had projects going on and we still had to deliver them, but we couldn't deliver them the way we thought we would. And so with the client, we had a lot of back and forth to pivot the approach, which actually in some cases gave rise to a bit more of a rich engagement with the client, as we all tried to figure out how to, work through this pandemic, and how to still get project objectives, on point. So for example, one of the first things we did on a research project is to actually have a virtual focus group discussion, which we would never have thought of before, but we were able to, in Hindi, with some migrant workers out of Jordan, actually put people in a room together and, have a good interaction and gain insights from the discussion, though it was, completely virtual. And this brings me to another point as we work, and now we're 1 year into the pandemic, working remotely. You also have to bring in the human touch. And this, I find, is a very interesting irony, where you say there's a lot more digital tools. You can, use so many different types of tools to help collaborative work, but you have to do it with some kind of human touch. Otherwise, it's just a digital tool. So how do you motivate people? How do you keep in touch with them more? And how do you make them work through this behavior change? For some people, that's very difficult to start, talking with a video it's not very easy to have your own video staring in your face. So these are some of the things that as teams, used to remote work, but still had to push ourselves to go that much further, started to realize. And I even wrote an article about, how functional remotely, has to also do a lot with behavioral change and has to do a lot also with human touch. So I would emphasize on that as, leading teams in this remote world is to make sure that you're still in touch with your human side, still in touch with your team, still trying to get the cultural element into discussions and taking that time out to spend time, even remotely, with your team and with your clients, with your partners. Some practical things on our industry, digitalization, we saw a lot of regulatory changes in a lot of markets that pushed a bit the digital agenda. So that was very good. It was positive. And it also gave room to talk about access, and I'll talk about it a little later, but how different segments are able to access more markets or access more communication tools or finance, for example. And then another thing I would like to maybe end with is, again, in our industry, we're focusing on inclusion and development. And to Brigitte's, statement earlier on about the pandemic taking women back decades, we see a lot of funds and a lot of push to focus on gender parity. And I think that is very encouraging to have projects actually focused on helping women have more access, helping women be more resilient, whether in their business or also just with education and using digital tools to do that. So that's very encouraging. And I'll stop there for now.
So yeah, I think it's fair to say that the pandemic has actually pushed forward digitalization, as you said, and that will be our next poll question also to the attendees. Do you think that this forward-moving trend will actually continue post-COVID-19?
So, still in progress. %40 have voted, 50.
Yeah, I think Sahana mentioned something very important, that people usually are a little bit resistant to change, that we especially saw at the beginning. But I think the longer we were exposed to this situation, people are now more open-minded to using different tools, to working remotely, to slowly getting used to this new way of working using digital tools, which is very important. And I think also it's good to push forward digitalizations that's been lacking in the past years. So yeah, that's very clear, I think.
So here are the results. Can you see? Yes.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, you can see it on screen. A very, very clear picture, I think.
Yeah, I would also say that we would see more digitization even after the pandemic, but also knowing that the pandemic will probably stay with us for a while. So we might not have another choice. But this leads me to Nadine, because your latest research is about the impact of the pandemic and other crises as well on micro entrepreneurs in Lebanon. What can you tell us about such impact on women, and more generally, how has the pandemic impacted women in the whole Arab world?
Thank you, Catherine. I got scared when you said we still had a little bit of time with this pandemic, but that's true. So first of all, thank you for having me. And let me first tell you that when I looked at the title of this panel, my stress level went up, because I've been thinking,
How are we going to find positive things coming out of this pandemic? I've been, researching, witnessing, and reading about like the negative impacts. I saw the World Economics Forum Global Gender Gap report that was published just yesterday, and the pandemic has become like this great decelerator for gender equality globally. So we're saying, 135 years to reach parity in this region, which scores lowest on every single factor in that report. It's even worse. It used to be 150 years. So we've been looking at job losses, twice as many women as men, more women-led businesses that were likely to close. And this is, for two primary reasons that I think everybody knows at this stage. One, the female led businesses or the sectors in which they work are the ones that have had the biggest demand shock. So from retail, trade, hospitality, services. And the second one, care, especially when schools and childcare were closed. We're speaking the latest reports of about 6 hours per day on household chores. And so, things are not different in the region. And last year had already 100,000 jobs to be lost. That is relatively small. So at CGAP, we focus on this or economic activities that are often ran by the low income and very often in the informal sector. And so what we have learned globally from the pandemic is that the low income have been disproportionately affected. We're speaking about 15% of the MSMEs globally that had to close, over 80% that saw a drop in profit, many by over 50%. And this in turn has impacted the income at the household level. And for the first time in 20 years, and really as a development professional, those are like really hard to say because we work exactly to revert those sort of trends. We're speaking about 1 in 3 households that are no longer able to sustain their basic needs for more than a month. So in Lebanon, I started the research practically before the pandemic hit to look at the clients of microfinance institutions because the country was going epic, actually financial and economic of the crisis. So the figures I just mentioned globally are just higher in Lebanon. We're speaking entrepreneurs, 95% actually saw their sales decrease. We're speaking 1 in 2 employees have lost their jobs. The ones who actually kept them had salary cuts. And so you combine that with higher rate of inflation and lower economy for the first time since 19, witnessing food poverty for the first time. And women, in our survey, they were half of the participants working. That's 3 times more than men. And the vast majority, practically 70%, said that they had to take care of family on their own. So what's the silver lining? I really had to thought hard about it. But we've seen in advanced economies, countries like the UK passing domestic bills that include economic abuse, for instance. Flexible work arrangements that we just mentioned, obviously those are going to live with us, and that's good news for women who need a bit more flexibility. There's also something that I think was mentioned by Her Excellency Cyprus at the beginning, saying more fathers have to actually take care of children during that past year, and that might shift the social norms going forward. And I'd just like to end with one anecdote. At the beginning of the pandemic, when we entered the first hard lockdown in Lebanon, the Minister of Interior, for some reason, on Sundays, prevented any food delivery at home. And he said on TV, well, that day women just have to cook. And there was a huge social media backlash, often led by men taking pictures of themselves cooking on a Sunday. And that men's reaction, to be honest, is heartening. It's not the majority, but it's a great trend to see. And I'll stop here for now.
Yeah, very, very interesting. And since you were saying that a lot of times for working women, the impact is really severe, we would like to pose another poll question, but I will ask the poll question to you also, Nadine. What initiatives do you think are most important to support, especially women that are working in post-COVID times? You are on mute, Nadine. You need to unmute yourself so we can hear you.
So poll is in progress.
Yeah, sorry about the mute. So when you ask women, actually, during COVID, what's the #1 policy measure that they would like to see? Interestingly enough, the ones that are married request support for household care. If you ask men, it's tax relief. And so I think going forward, the importance of daycare just cannot be emphasized enough. That's crucial going forward, freeing time, but also freeing the minds of women to be able to dedicate time for their work while having the peace of mind that the ones they care about are being taken care about properly.
So here we go with the results. Okay. Oh, interesting.
Oh, that's a little bit unexpected for me. That actually the majority thinks that strengthen networking to increase business opportunities is the most important going forward. Interesting, yes, but
here we go.
Yeah, talking about compatibility of family and career, I would like to ask Her Excellency Brigitte Südpers. You're not just working, I would say, in a still predominantly male-conquered environment, but I would argue also in a less, somewhat less innovative one. How has adapting to this new work-life balance affected the compatibility of work and family, or career and family for women?
Sorry, I didn't understand the question.
Sorry. So, do you feel that digitization and being able to work remotely from home for a lot of working women has made it easier to combine career and family?
Yeah, well, as I said in my introduction words already, it's a question of whom you look. I know a lot of partners in various companies who work from home now, and of course it makes it easier for them because they have a nice house and different rooms, and everybody has got his own computer and her own computer, and probably they have someone to look after the kids as well. And then, of course, it's easier to do the work from home. But there are thousands and, well, much more families in Germany and all over Europe where this is not possible. And it's very hard to work from home and share the small space and even look after the children. This is the one thing. And the other thing is that I think it's more difficult in these times to continue your career, because the question of who is going to take the next step is not only a question of how you do your work, it's also a question of how you fit emotionally with the people around you, and all these things beside your actually work are very important. And this is something which is much more difficult if you only meet yourself in Zoom conferences like this, because you don't have these informal meetings Even so, it's possible that you organize side rooms, but still it's not the same as if you meet in the company. And this is why I think leadership is so especially difficult in these times as well. Because once you are a person who has to look after the people working with you, well, in former times when I came to the ministry in the morning, I just looked in every door and said, hey, how are you today? And you usually could tell just by one glimpse how people feel, or what is there something where you probably better ask again and try to get a small talk about what's going on. But all those things do not happen in these days. And this is what I think makes it difficult to follow a career in the companies.
Right. I would like to bring in Dr. Ilham to this conversation because she's not only a researcher and an educator, but she's also a mother. So maybe you can tell us about how the pandemic has impacted you on a personal level.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, everybody, and good evening. Yeah, I wish I could share my voice message when we have this WhatsApp group with my, female researchers, when I knew that we will have a 1 month lockdown, in March 2020. I was, screaming, because given the life that I used to live with all those traveling, conferences and events, being, the Dean of Scientific Research, and suddenly I need to stay home for 30 days. But after that, I was amazed how I coped very nicely and smoothly. And even I enjoyed this peaceful, new environment. I was amazed from myself, for me, 65 days, I didn't leave the home unless to the supermarket. I never let anybody to visit me or go, to visit anybody. So it was really, I was, very strict in my safety measures. But it was seems as a resetting point for me. It is the first time that I just, calm down, pause, and rethink my career, restructure my priority, think what I need to do next. So I felt I had, especially in the few, early months, a very good time to sit. And we usually, researchers accumulate data that, we collect in many projects, and we don't have time to write them down, especially when you have other responsibilities education and also administration and home. So I had and I know me and other colleagues had the time, the quality time to write those. Usually myself, I usually produce 1 to 2 papers in a year because, I try to publish in high-ranked journals. This year I have 9 papers between publishing and reviewing, and submission. So for me, that was really a great opportunity. I also had the opportunity, me and my students, we always busy, my students with their, studying, and me with other things, but we had now the opportunity to work together and to mentor them. And 3 papers of those 9 papers, they were work with the students. So we were very happy to that. But we can't say it's all, pink. We had these problems. I have half of my family in another country, across the Atlantic. And suddenly, we have the problems we used to meet, more often during the year. So in general, this year has some negatives really on science, all the closures of labs, inaccessibility to work, researchers who work on field settings, they can't go out, they cannot collect data, cut off funding, refocusing all, the efforts and funding only to COVID-related research. There is no other types of research that get the funding, even the publication, the publishing and the reviewing process
for the publication have slowed down for many. And interestingly, like the research showed that publishing for women in the past year was less than men because of the things that the women need to take responsibility extra to their work. Hiring was also suspended for researchers and faculty. Also, admission to postgraduate, positions, which are the main workforce for research, also was in freeze, as my colleague said, about travel, networking, which is very vital for researchers. But at the same time, science maybe since like ages has this recognition that, and it was pushed to the front. And now politicians, policymakers, and leaders, now they always, base their new policies on evidence and on science. And this is something very new that we hope to keep after that. Now they don't change anything, or when they change things, they need to bring in, the research or the evidence for that. There is a very interesting survey that was sent out a few months ago by the Organization of Women in Science for Developing Countries. And many women, they were surveyed in developing countries and in other countries to ask them about the positive effects of this pandemic on them. And as all my colleagues indicated, 54% said they enjoyed more flexible working hours, and 42% that they used this time for more professional skills or experience training. And 27% think that they have more available time for research. And also researchers enjoyed, or women researchers in particular, 20% of them enjoyed their public engagement, where they did, research directly to COVID or related to COVID, or some those activities that related in raising awareness. And they also indicated some positive effects on home and family life. They said they have more time to bond. They enjoyed, being more involved in their children, education and learning. And also they felt that their children have matured, or maybe they noticed that because they had spent more time in it. And but also some of them, they said that their mental well-being was affected. 24% they thought that they were negatively affected, and 10% thought that they were severely affected. If you want to talk, the same survey also asked about the negative impact, and it was mainly 67% to travel to conferences. It seemed that the women researchers were enjoying the travel a lot. Being unable to perform experiments, 56%, 31% affected their teaching, 22% unable to follow courses, 17% suspension of ongoing funding. They can't 16% they couldn't submit funding proposal, or 14% in publication. Also, 5% responded that they reported that they lost their jobs during this pandemic. The main factors were the inability to access their facilities and the reduced available hours to work, which is, as we said, because many of the hours, were devoted to household or care responsibility. But maybe the main factor was the lack of reliable internet connection. And this is, we can see, this is a big problem, especially in developing countries, where the access to all those resources, training courses, even streaming, we have lots of resources, but the problem, the inequality to access those from different, geographic area and from different economic status. So those were, from the negatives and all stuff.
Thank you. That's a very good point. But I want to focus maybe a little bit more about your particular situation in the region, because I know, and because we were talking about access for your students, I know for some students, it's not easy to travel to the institutions because they have to commute, and sometimes there are roadblocks or maybe checkpoints. Do you feel that this has a positive, maybe having the option of going virtual and online also had a positive effect and actually gave more people access to education?
Yeah, I think switching, if we talk about education and switching to virtual, should be like one of the innovation that we need to keep after the pandemic. And this, discussion was also raised in our institution, and we are trying now to work with the ministries to put policies for, e-learning and to organize it. And because in the past, there was some, challenges to accept degrees that, include many e-learning. But now the ministries and the accreditation body is thinking very seriously, to accept the e-learning courses or even e-learning a whole degree. And as you said, you were absolutely right that if this model can work for any country or any place, it works well here, because we have all those challenges in access and in transportation and in all the delay on the checkpoints. So I always thought when we started virtual, and that why we didn't think of that, before. This is really an ideal situation to what's happening. And we are discussing this very seriously that we will do that, yes.
Katrin, if I may jump in and perhaps bring in some remarks and comments from the audience, because that really fits in. One comment is, unfortunately, I cannot see the name, but the biggest challenge was to go from home to the university work, because it takes sometimes an hour, sometimes 2 hours, lost time in checkpoints and traffic. Apparently, this is a Palestinian friend writing this here. So you can do much more work and much more meetings online without the need to commute. So this exactly proves what you were just discussing. And a second comment I would like to read as well. Dear all, thank you very much, and so on. Unfortunately, I have to leave now because home officing ends, and now bringing the kids. So here we are in the middle of the thematic. Please keep all safe and best regards. Okay, so it is Dr. Safa. I just get the information that that comment was from Dr. Safa, Vice President in the university where you, Dr. Ilham, are. So just to bring the audience in, thank you.
Right, perfect, yeah. And I want to directly go over to Sahana again and ask, what were your observations? How has going digital, let's say, helped women during the pandemic, and also how has innovation and technology affected the livelihoods of the people that you work with, if there were any positive effects at all?
Thanks, Katrin. There's no easy way to answer that in a generalized approach, right? Going digital means so many different things for so many different segments. So maybe I try to give some examples or anecdotes, that I observed during my work. Going digital, what could that mean for someone in the low, income segment or a micro business, woman business, for example? It would be, having the tools she needs to keep her business up and running, maybe to accept a payment from a customer, to be able to pay her supplier digitally. So these are things that we are seeing happening with a lot of focus ever since the pandemic started on the micro and small medium enterprise segment. And women, I was just reading some stats the other day from SME Finance Forum, women make up close to 25% of the SME sector, and that's even much more when we talk about micro businesses, right? So going digital and building resilience, and this, you know, we see across the board, whether it's Middle East, Asia, Africa, Latin America. I was reading an article the other day about a Bangladeshi small business holder who was able to get on board herself a mobile wallet now, and she says now because of the pandemic, you know, payment processors are actually coming to us instead of going only to the big brands and the big supermarkets, and that was a really nice, you know, example saying, okay, well, there is interest also from the supply side, that, you know, this segment of population that's very important for local economies, you know, men businesses and women-led businesses, that are now having access and increased supply to get on these digital payment channels. Another segment we could look at is the salaried women, the low-income salaried women. We've been doing some work in Jordan with the migrant worker population. And of course, they send most of their money back home. I mean, this is whether they're men or women, they send more than 80% of their money back home to their households. And being able to do that digitally without having to go out of their residence, you know, stand in queues. There was fear also about cash being able to spread the virus. So the prospects of what digital can do for them as they try to manage the expectations also back home, you know, is very, very promising. And regulatory changes, as I said, also help and promote this access. I was reading some news articles on BBC the other day about women at home, you know, housewives, who started a food business in India because they suddenly had this demand and they were making food and there were people working in the neighborhood and they were able to then make a, you know, a small business out of it. So, and that's, you know, okay, it's physical food, but how did they get the word out there? And, you know, and how do they get their orders? It could be as simple as WhatsApp, but which is also a very powerful, you know, digital communication tool. We talked a lot in this panel already about the corporate woman, you know, who's now sitting at home, doesn't have to travel, you know, and to Nadine's point, if there is adequate daycare for children or support at these as they do their homework or online, then can also give enough time to work while being at home and while being more involved in their children's lives, you know. And I have a colleague who mentioned that the other day. You know, her son is 15, 16 years old, but she now gets to be more part of his life at school, which is online from home, but also in choices of how, you know, he spends time, what they can do together, etc. So this brings a very more holistic, you know, environment for the family and for the woman itself. And again, you know, thanks to digital and being able to stay at home. I had a talk with a medical practitioner the other day who, you know, said it's great for her industry. She's, you know, pro breastfeeding, and she said women can stay at home and still breastfeed, but still do their work, which is so important because before there was so much pressure of, you know, the 3-month mark and you have to get back to work. What do you do with the baby? How do you feed the baby, etc. So these are all very, you know, encouraging signs, and of course anecdotal, but from my observations of how different segments are profiting from going, you know, digital. In terms of, you know, how this digital and technology innovation has helped livelihoods, in general, I mean, what is the most important that we can take out from a digital tool? It will give you communication, right, or access to people, access to information and knowledge, which is so important these days. And this allows, you know, low-income segments or people in businesses, people who need to be connected, you know, actually be able to do those things with the right tools if they have access to it in their environment, given the infrastructure in different countries. Sometimes there's cultural issues, you know, women don't have access to the phone, it's the men in the family that have access to the phone. So it really depends on the context of the woman and her environment. On the flip side, when you're from a more developed world and you are, you know, in the corporate life and, you know, the businesswoman, it can create a lot of stress as well. You know, there's so many different channels of information now and so many different apps to check. And you almost they get up in the morning and like, oh my God, have I missed something? What have I missed? And you're sleeping at night, like, okay, what should I, retain before I go to sleep? And in response to that, on a positive note, you have so many tools now that help you meditate from home, that help you do yoga from home. I have a friend who's, giving Bollywood classes from home, and you can join in and dance for 1 hour and feel okay. So I think it's all coming together about how you manage it yourself, of course with a little help from the household, from your entourage, which is very important, but how you make those choices, and you can now, without having to spend 1 hour in travel to commute, etc., do it from home. So yeah, I'm optimistic, as long as we don't go overboard with the digital influence.
Yeah, thank you, Sahana. And I'll throw the ball into Nadine's corner again now, because we've been talking about micro businesses and financing, and I would like to know how the pandemic impacted women's access to financial services from your experience and observation.
Thanks, Catherine. Let me just unpack a little bit the financial services and take them, product by product. So savings, Sahana mentioned WhatsApp. Savings are a tool for resilience. We've known that for a long time, and they played this role during the pandemic. What we know about women is that they tend to engage much more in informal savings, notably through savings groups, much more than men. And they have used those funds for emergency during the pandemic. But what was interesting on the digitization side is that it has also accelerated a little bit the digitization, obviously where smartphones were available. For instance, we've seen WhatsApp groups put together to maintain, when women were not able to connect in person, the sort of transparency, reporting, and trust that you need in those groups. So that's on the savings part. On the financing, the news is a little bit less good. Be it from like startups, larger companies, we've seen significantly less investment in women-led companies. In the MSME space in general, there's been smaller demand. I mentioned earlier, a number of women actually exited the workforce. So on the medium, longer run, it's not too clear how they will re-engage in the economy. In this region, in the Arab world, the bulk of the supply in terms of financing still comes from traditional macrofinance institutions. And I would trust there, it's been 2-3 decades of experience servicing those populations. So I'm pretty sure they will stick by their clients as the economy rebounds. Third product, insurance. For me, this is where the potential is huge. Penetration is very, very low. And this is where I hope things will change. And we've seen during the pandemic, very interesting things happening at the nexus of insurance, telemed, microfinance. And so we've seen, for instance, one experiment in Egypt where about 20,000 people were offered free consultation services through telemedicine, including for COVID. And so that's huge. What you can do with that in the region is just huge. And speaking of fintech, we've been doing a study looking at the sector across the region. And so we've identified 400 fintechs. And very interestingly, a tiny portion, just 2% of them, focus on women. It's still very small, but there's a lot of potential, because when they have this deliberate approach to actually reach out to women, what we know and we have seen is that the uptake is greater for women, but also for men. So it just makes, business, economic, and social sense. And seeing this moving from pilot stage in this tiny minority to becoming more stream is our hope for the future. And one last point, which is on account ownership. That's usually formal account ownership, a primary entry point into financial inclusion. The landscape has been changing. Sahana mentioned more and more mobile wallets are being offered in the region. And the COVID-19 response has been a lot about, for businesses, support, and for households, cash support. There's been a lot of calls for the cash support to households to go directly to women. And you combine that with the fact that they can actually get those digitally on mobile wallets, you have a huge opportunity. Now, the calls have been there. Whether they have actually been happening, did they translate into figures? We don't know yet. The one example we have from Kenya, which has been at the forefront of digital financial services for a long while, is that both value and volume, there has been a huge increase in transactions, and women have actually transacted twice more than men. And so that makes us helpful. An institution like CGAP, we're surely doubling down on support for women and financial services moving forward.
That's actually a silver lining, no? Like a positive outlook, if you want.
Adrien, we have a question directly
Sure.
to Nadine, coming from Nadere. May I perhaps read that one? I have a question regarding supply chains. One of the early bottlenecks for every country was the disruption of supply chains on many fronts. There is a push to nearshore more. Would this provide more business opportunities for women instead of sourcing from China? That's to Nadine.
It's a tough question. I mean, let me unpack it the way I unpacked financial services. So yeah, you have supply chain and you have China as a competitor, but it competes usually, on price, on quantities, on capacity to actually deliver. And we're seeing just with the vaccine today, I mean, it's a big issue in the supply chain to be able to deliver goods and services in a reliable manner. And in bulk. So is that done? I think that we've seen the kind of proximity businesses. So yes, there might be a revival of the supply chains. The lockdowns have revived somehow the importance of just local production of some sort of self-sufficiency. How all of this will translate, because you actually need policies as well to accompany that movement moving forward. That is still a big question mark. So opportunities, yes, and then hope for the future, of course.
Thank you. I want to bring back Sabine into the discussion, and we've already in the beginning spoke a little bit about an increased demand, if you want, for those training techniques and learning how to be more innovative. But what's your pandemic best practice, if you want? You need to unmute yourself. Yes.
Well, when we planned the design thinking workshop for 45 women of a women network, and we planned this workshop for March last year, and then the pandemic started and we postponed that workshop to June. Then we found out we couldn't do it in June. Then we postponed it to October. And in October, we just said, well, let's just try it. And we weren't really sure if with 45 people in different breakout rooms, we will really come up with new ideas. And when we planned the workshop, people said, well, we could either work with collaboration software like Mural, or in Germany we have Miro, or we have Concept Board, but I think internationally you have Mural. And well, there you could, you have like a digital flip chart, and you have that little post-its that you could flip over the digital flip chart. And the lady whom I organized the workshop with, she said, no, let's do it in breakout rooms without digital boards, without Mural. And I thought that was really a very good idea, because we had that what Sahana mentioned at the beginning. You need the personal aspect. And those 45 women in the network, they were so happy that in the innovation workshop, they had time to talk to each other. They saw them for the first time after 6 months of pandemic break, and they came out with wonderful ideas, but only working in little groups, seeing them on a Zoom network, and we were surprised of their good work and good results.
Perfect, thank you. I just got the information that Her Excellency Brigitte Cyprus, she needs to leave, so maybe allow me one last question, because we were talking a lot about policies. So what can politics change now? Do we need also more women as a role model? What would you advise young women nowadays? If you still have time.
No, I think Katrin, she has left already, because there was an urgent call for her. So she just typed me in the private chat, please let Katrin know. So I don't know, do we have any other politicians here who could answer that, perhaps from the audience? What can policymakers do? Because she says goodbye and thank you so much for having her. But perhaps we take that one to the audience. Do we have any politicians here? Just wait a little bit, and Katrin, perhaps you just move forward.
Yeah, I think it. Some of our panelists have already mentioned that policies and changing policies is very important to incorporate those new technologies and actually enable people and create more access for everyone to those digital tools. So that's one point. And actually, that would also lead me to like a conclusion, if you want, because I think we've touched upon various aspects right now, and everyone gave experience through your the particular sector that you're working in. So maybe a more general question to everyone, if there is anything else that you would like to share with the audience, or maybe how you see the future in a couple of years. Like what do you think is going to happen in the next couple of years? A more general outlook. And I'll just open the floor to anyone who'd like to start. Whether on a personal level or in the sector that you work in, can be both. Dr. Ilham wants to start.
Yeah, I think like the pandemic like brought also two important things to researchers and scientists. The first one is the great collaboration that we didn't see before, like international collaboration and local collaboration between different labs, different scientists, even different nations to access data. And one of like the famous examples, when the genome sequencing of the virus, like after recognition of the condition as a disease, like few days, and like China released the sequencing of genome that usually takes a lot of time, and people or researchers prefer to publish it first. So the great collaboration that happened internationally and locally between researchers, and the opportunities that using the virtual meetings or e-learning to bring expertise to our students and to our researchers for training that we would could not do it in person, or to bring all those opportunity and all this interaction between our students, our young researchers, and all those experts before. So the thing that's how we can use or how we can keep those innovations. The pandemic showed us how the research or scientists doing research was very ineffective. It was slow, very expensive, not addressing all the things that cares for researchers. And during the pandemic, many innovations have been used to increase the speed of research. And we can know how vaccine, in 10 months, we have like from starting, working in the vaccine to starting, the first trial, or, starting the vaccination campaign. It has like only 10 months, which this is happened before. So to increase the speed, the efficiency, reducing the burden on the researchers, decrease, Because, so some of the example was the telehealth, and I think Nadine mentioned it in our, meeting before, using the telehealth, the remote monitoring of patients in clinical trials. That was very important and accelerated the work on those clinical trials, especially that related to COVID. And one of the most important also aspects in research is the streamlining of the IRB, or the ethics board approval. It was like the most complicated process that you ever, have as a researcher to get an ethical approval for your research proposal. So we emphasize that we need to keep, the good design, the good methodology, the perfect analysis, the good ethics, but at the same time, we need to accelerate the work of the IRB boards. And that's what happened in the pandemic. And the IRB board now became like a partners in the research. They get more involved and helping, to accelerate getting the approval by putting their input. And also a new model that's now more common in research, which is the preprint. See many data published in the preprint, before going the thorough review, with the caution, about that this is preprint, because now everybody is eager to see the data and don't, wait for the whole review process. So all those sharing, all those collaboration, all those innovation in telehealth and remote, I think we need to keep after, and I think those innovation will have a very good impact on science. And those are the things that we learned during the pandemic.
Thank you for your input. Who would like to go next? Maybe Nadine?
Yeah, I can do that. I was thinking, I think the future will probably be faster and better at the same time. So faster because the digitization trend that we've seen is just here, as Elham mentioned. I mean, things that we couldn't do just 10 years ago, like sequencing a genome or other things, but also plenty of other things, like massive delivery of groceries at home. I'm not sure we're going back to having gigantic supermarkets, for instance, in the middle of the cities, and things like that. I think something along those lines will change for things to be faster, but also better. I was struck when Elham mentioned that, at the beginning of the pandemic, there was the silence and this moment where you can think and research and, sometimes, at least at the beginning, spend quality time with your family. I think this, for me at least, on a personal even level, the pandemic highlighted the needs to kind of, be connected, move fast, do plenty of things, but also take time to withdraw, think, and be a bit more quiet and at peace, even if the speed of the world continues. So that's a little bit how I see things moving forward. And yeah, digital, of course, a lot, but also a lot of high touch, I hope, again, soon.
Katrin, if I may read something from Anne-Marie from the audience, because that matches need of interdisciplinary education, arts, science, spirituality in a changing economy. So really that holistic approach. And we have another comment from Nadere. I'm not a policymaker, but I see that there is a greater realization that the care function is where the tire meets the road, and that the care economy needs to be more developed. It had been largely neglected because women did that work. Now we see that without organization, the sector, other sectors can't function well, and so forth. I think this is also a very good approach to see, again, all is interconnected.
Definitely, yes, yeah. Sahana and Sabine, what's your outlook for the future?
I was just going to take up on what Gabi said about, interconnected. More and more in my line of work, we are looking at the digital component with a non-digital expertise. And it amazes me as how we need to bring those together. It's still not that evident. So you can have, like in the health sector, a doctor, and you need to bring digital into his world, for example. Or you have an educator, and you need to bring digital. Or you have a farmer, in the field, and you need to bring digital into his world or her world. So I think this pandemic has, accelerated that need. And because we're digital, we're also able to find these experts and put teams together who can then work in a collaborative fashion and, bring something meaningful, to the table. So I'm quite excited about those prospects, as challenging it may sound, but very excited when we can actually bring this digital rails onto, sectors that are largely not that used to being, digitally wired, let's say. And another thought, I think, and I used to travel, 3 times, 4 times a month. The last time I took a plane was in February 2020. So it's changed, my life completely. And I'm still not really raring to go. I mean, I would like to. I love the travel. I like meeting people. I like seeing different places. But this kind of gave me time. I have a 5-month-old, so personally, it gave me time also to be with family, which is very precious. But I like the fact that we are contributing to less, to the carbon footprint. We don't have to travel so much, and we can still have, meaningful interaction like this one without going on a plane and, having to be 3 days or 4 days at some conference. So I think this will continue. And it will continue to be rich, and I look forward to more exchange like this. Thanks for the opportunity.
Well, I also think that for our environment, it's really helpful that we now have both methods. That on one side we could meet personally. That's obviously very, very important. But on the other side, a lot of organizational things before could be mentioned on a digital way with our tools that we have at the moment. That's very, very helpful, and I hope afterwards that we could put those together, that we have a Zoom meeting in before and then we are able to meet personally. That will be wonderful after that pandemic. What I would like to mention, I'd like to have a short glance on the elder people, on the Silver Society, because in Germany, a lot of those are feel very, very lonesome at the moment, and they have real personal problems, and we spend much more time with them because they can't live their own life at the moment. They are really, we are responsible for them, that they are that they have program at the moment, that we keep in touch. And even the parents, they use digital things like Zoom or Skype, and they try to get used to use those. So that's very, very amazing. But I think in the next years we should look very carefully at our children, because also our children at the moment, they feel really lonesome. They are at home. They have just digital schooling. Some can invite one friend, but some are lonesome at home. And I think we really have to have a close look at them in the next years. Well, we are working. My life hasn't changed really. I'm working digitally the whole day, but the Silver Society and the children, I think we have really have a very focused eye on them in the next years.
Yes. Gabi, are there any more questions from the audience? Or
there's a nice remark, which is really nice. LinkedIn gives a great possibility to meet personally afterwards. So that's it.
Okay. Yeah, I think we touched upon a lot of aspects, but maybe if it's possible to quickly summarize the discussions. And at this point, I would like to thank everyone for your time and for sharing your experience from your field, which I think was very, very useful and can be applied onto different areas of your life, and also sharing your personal experience as well. So I think if it's fair to say that we don't want to neglect all the negative impacts that obviously the pandemic has had and is still causing, but having great tools with technology and digitization, I think we really accelerated on different levels, and also created more opportunity to participate for people, but also for women. And maybe we will try to take this as a motivation to work towards more inclusion, not only for women, but for people that are less fortunate. So I think there is a lot of positive aspects that we touched upon today. And again, I would like to thank you for sharing your experience from your different fields and from your personal life. A lot of the things that you have said, I can echo as well. And I think it was a great exchange. Gabi, if you would like to say a few last words as well, or conclusion.
I would love to. Thank you all. Such an amazing, high profile, and for me, eye-opening, enriching session. And I have many takeaways, but one takeaway goes to you, Sahana. Next time, we're going to include a yoga session. Why not? And definitely meet in person. So thank you all for having shared your profound expertise, your knowledge, your experience. And I was really touched by your very personal insight, because that makes it very authentic and tangible. And we all can kind of align or match to. So for me, it was both inspiring, a call for action, and for innovation, and for staying connected. So we are indebted to all of you. Katrin, you did a wonderful moderation. Our wonderful speakers, again, sharing your insight, and engaged participants. Unfortunately, we could not read everything and participate, make you participate here. But we stay connected for sure, and that is a promise. So at this point, a massive thank you again to everyone for having joined our virtual format, for having supported our idea of exchange and being connected, that we at GAWBL with our partners are really striving for. This is where our heart and soul goes, and this is why we really hope to see you later this year again. So stay in touch, write us about the topics you wish to discuss, text us about your initiatives, your many plans you have, so that we can hopefully meet again later this year. Stay well, stay safe, and stay connected. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure having you all and sharing your tremendous expertise. Thank you, bye-bye, and see you very, very soon.